Okay, sounds good. Go ahead, Frank.
All right. Call the meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, Jill.
Frank Carini,
Here.
Cheryl Cerniglia,
Here.
Amy Malat,
Here.
Leah Schreiber-Johnson,
Here.
Mark Verhalen,
Here.
Darren Grabowski,
Here.
Jane Eichhoff.
Here.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining our school board meeting on March 30th at 6 o'clock today. Right into the agenda, number 4. Can we have a motion on the personnel?
Cerniglia moves to approve. Malat second.
Any discussion? I do like to bring up Annaline Benning. Thank you for being a phenomenal employee of ours. We are going to truly miss you, and wish you luck. Good luck and fortune on your new endeavors. And please keep in touch. But thank you for all the hard work you've done for this school district and for our kids and for our community. So thank you.
And me?
Thank
you. I appreciate it.
Comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Number 5, planning for payment of employees during shutdown. Do we have a motion?
So, thank you, Frank. We have a whole bunch of information here associated with this particular item. And this is our first meeting since the crisis began. So I'll note that. So there's a lot of
Can I
changes.
just ask for Frank to turn off his microphone?
Can you mute your mic?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Thanks.
Okay, so you can see we're still struggling with this new technology. I'll note for the record too, our board, we're collected in the district office conference room. We're all spread out several feet apart, and we're working with our new teleconference features that we're thinking of using as we move forward and update policy. So here we all are, kind of like at sweetheart tables at a wedding, all spread out from one another. And this is paneling behind me is district office. It is not my rec room in the basement with these with the workflow posters behind me. So. But this item on the agenda, right, has garnered a great deal of attention. And I'll note that this is our first meeting since the crisis, like I said. So it's been the first time that the board's been together to be able to work through this issue as a collective body, right? We need some authority to be able to make choices around this issue. So each school district has had to make choices which determine who's to provide essential government services, right? And as our virtual schools come online in early April, all this hard work will start to come together. Roughly 10% of our workforce cannot perform the critically valuable work that they perform day to day for us virtually, right? So we have 9/10 of our employees roughly that will be working to service our virtual learning going forward. And then a very valued group of individuals who do work that just simply can't be performed virtually, right? So that's the reason for this report. And that's the reason why we come together as a group so the board can grant authority to the district administrative team to make decisions in terms of work rules and compensation for this group of individuals. So that's why we're here. So Andy and Troy have worked endlessly since the first day of the shutdown as the work rules landscape has rapidly evolved. All sorts of big questions, what's within the scope of our authority, what's happening at the federal and state level. Frank and other board members have been following this diligently, sending us questions, telling us what's been going on in their world of work and what they've been observing at their various places of employment or various media outlets they've been consuming. So even since the publication last week of this report, the rules and guidance around this issue has continued to evolve, right? So our board often requires options from our executive team, but tonight our options as they see them are pretty limited. And I think most of the board would agree with that, but I don't presume to speak for everybody. But we're going to have that moment in a minute. My position is a layoff would no doubt leave us understaffed when we find ourselves attempting to reopen at a moment's notice. And we have to be able to reopen at a moment's notice and return to work. Also, a layoff would result in the district retaining funds that have already been taxed and remain with the district. However, a further tax burden from the resulting unemployment claims would again be passed on to the taxpayer. So basically, people were taxed once to pay for these folks, and they'd be taxed again indirectly to pay their unemployment benefits later on. So that's a further complication to this issue. So I understand that for these very reasons, the state is currently considering legislation prohibiting a school board from issuing layoffs for these reasons during a public health emergency. So I'd ask the board to weigh in on this and share their perspectives, but I think item 6 allows us to recognize the emerging legislation and discussions at the state level around the subject, right? And also recognize that these folks are vitally important for us to be able to staff our buildings as soon as humanly possible, the moment we're asked by the state or federal government to return to normal functions. So that's my 2 cents. And if somebody would like to raise a motion on this particular issue, the full body could discuss, and we can go to a vote on this one. I know we're going to have a lot of interested people watching this afterwards, so most important item for the night, my opinion. So that's my say.
Grabowski motions, planning for payment of employees during shutdown. Very good.
ICOP seconds.
Okay, any discussion?
One moment, one clarification if I could ask. Could I ask for the motion to be restated with the selection of the option that you'd like?
Yep, no problem.
So could you motion again, but this time motion, I move to enact 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
Yep.
6 as presented.
We can't see 6.
Yeah, right.
Grabowski motions, planning for payment of employee during shutdown on number 6, all remaining wages. District pays 100%.
And ICOP seconds that.
Any discussion?
Yeah, Frank. First one question for Andy, I guess. Does the school district pay unemployment into the state already on all of our employees, or no?
We do unemployment on a pay-as-you-go basis.
You're not, your mic's not on, Andy.
The district pays unemployment on a pay-as-you-go basis, so we do not pay a monthly premium. We pay as claims come against us.
All right. So in other words, any layoffs that would, if we decide to go with a layoff type of scenario, any layoffs that would be incurred we'd have to begin paying unemployment to the state for
Correct.
those people that were laid off. Hence the issue that Dan brought up.
Correct.
Because as you remember, I was in, and we had kind of a small discussion about this the other day. Me and Andy and Chris was in on it too a little bit. In lieu of paying all of the remaining wages, and I wasn't aware that we weren't paying an unemployment at the time either, but in lieu of paying all the wages, my suggestion was let those people file for unemployment. The state pays so much, the federal government is also willing to put in a certain amount to make those people more whole. But at the end of the day, since we couldn't pay those people any more wages while they're collecting unemployment to make them 100% whole, my idea was to give everybody a stipend on whatever balance that the unemployment didn't pay them while they were off. Thereby, the $500 and some thousand that those people are going to get paid for the next 8 or 9 weeks, we would probably save $350,000 of that, although we'd have to pay the unemployment tax on the other side. But everyone here has got to realize that there's going to be, I think, a lot of mandates come down from the state by the start of the next school year. And I think if we could save a little bit of money by doing it with the scenario that I just suggested, you'd have a little bit of money to, put towards whatever's mandated when we go back to school in the fall. Because I think we're going to get hit with all kinds of extra protocols and all kinds of things we're going to have to do at the schools. It's going to cost this district a lot of extra money, which we probably won't have come fall. Just to shoot it out there, just looking for some input.
So we've been provided some guidance on that, which came down today, and restating kind of what Dan said, that the state is going to pass a law that says we are not eligible to lay off employees due to the double taxation, essentially a property tax to pay them their wage, and then we'd be taxing them for the increase that the state is now funding via the unemployment compensation. So school districts are going to not be allowed that particular option. So while number one happens to be on the list, if we go back to our situation report, this was drafted again about 8 different times, and 80 hours of the last 80 hours of Troy's life have been done on this. And these options were all vetted out through us, and over the course of time have changed just as different things have come down to us. We'll talk a little bit later, but as of 3:50 this afternoon, something will change a little bit later on today that we'll talk about. So things are just constantly evolving. So number one is almost assuredly off the table, just waiting for a vote, which is almost assuredly going to happen from what we've been provided.
I will note for the board too that we've been continuously monitoring everything that's been evolving, like in the world of work rules changes, federal and state issues. I assigned Andy 2 more webinars this afternoon on subjects like this. So as things kind of evolve, like we're going to keep watching it really close. And if there's something important that affects decisions we're making right now, we'll of course bring it back to you. So.
I'd just like to say, am I on? I'd just like to say that my concern with what Mark was saying is that I feel like if we would do something like that, one, it sounds like it's going to be against the law, but two, I don't feel like it's right to save a few dollars based on some of our lower paid employees. That just doesn't look right to me, especially at this time in this crisis. So I'm more in support of item 6 because I think it shows how much we value our employees and that we want them to be available to us at a moment's notice when we need them. And it's just at this point in time, I think it's just the right thing to do. And I know this district has been working really, really hard on this. And this is not administration's fault. This was, we didn't have this in our bylaws. This was not in our policies, our procedures, our guidelines. So they had to bring this forward to the board to get some guidance. So I'm supportive of item number 6.
Cheryl, I'd like to echo some of the things that you said. I kind of jotted some notes down, so forgive me as I kind of read from them just to make sure I'm covering everything. First, I appreciate the support that I saw from all of the teachers and the paid staff reaching out to me, and I know a number of the other board members saying, please make sure you're paying these individuals. I also as well wanted to clarify a number of the messages that I got said, please don't support administration's decision to not pay these individuals. We often, in a lot of things that we need to vote on, ask for options, and that's what we were given, options, but there was nothing to me that ever came from Dan, from Andy, from Troy saying, let's go with 1 or 2, we'll save some money. There were some questions on whether individuals who were going to be paid would feel differently about someone who is not working being paid. I was much more comfortable fielding a question from someone who says, why are you doing that, than I am, like Cheryl said, trying to say we wanted to save some money and that's why we're, not paying someone. This is as well not a time to look at how you can maybe save some money here or there. These are all individuals, a number of them who've reached out to me as well saying, I would be happy to work, to do anything that someone has that's available. They did nothing to put themselves in this situation. If we can find work for them to do, they want to be working. So I as well support decision or number 6 as an option.
Yeah, I'm the same. And I would just say that these aides in our district do so much that if we were to lose them, we would be really lost when we do come back to school. And they are valued by not only their coworkers, but the students. And so for that, I am all for number 6.
How does Darren? Can you hear me? I motion for this because I understand with the aides, they're not under contract, and this is their livelihood. This is what pays their bills. And granted, if we were in school, they'd be in school. And unfortunately, we're not because of the pandemic. And I believe it's only right to pay them because they're well appreciated by the district office administration and the school board and the teachers. Without them, we don't move forward. We're in a bind. But this is their livelihood. That's how I feel. And I believe that they need to get paid because if school was in, they would be here.
I'll just chime in. Just want to say that I'm super proud of the conversation that's happening in this room right now, and that everybody, I hope that anybody that sees this meeting really understands that there was never a moment through this whole, kind of topic, this heated topic, right, that was ever actually heated. I think it's so easy to assume that people are not their best when things are stressed. But I think that what's happening in this room right now hopefully shows the teachers that, we never had intended to have anyone feel like they weren't valued. This is just a strange situation and a process that had to happen. And I just think that the words of my fellow board members here all are a great representation of how I feel as well.
Can you guys hear me? Yeah. Okay. I want to say thank you, first of all, to all the teachers and citizens of the community of Oak Creek and Franklin who reached out to me via email and phone calls, many of them. Thank you for taking your time reaching out to not only myself, but the rest of the school board members, and how you feel and how passionate you are to these aides. I also support number 6. These aides are so important. They're hard workers. They'll do anything they can do to help these people out, from special ed to, elementary to 5K to all the way up to high school. And so I know we have this huge stimulus package going through, and it starts April 6th and it goes to the 20th and all that in all these conversations. But these additional weeks are definitely worth. I just wanted to let the aides know that we thank you for all your hard work. Concur with, majority of the board members here, and how precious and how huge of an asset you are, not only to our school board, our staff, to executive team, and to the community as a whole. We thank you because we have aides that have been here from 3 months to 30 years. And so that's a huge range, and not to say that thank you. And I also wanted to be pretty clear that this is not coming from, option 1 was not coming from the district administration. And it was basically, we have to have this conversation like all the other board members were talking about. And these are the topics all the different topics that we could choose and have conversations about. But I want to, the administration and the executive team do appreciate all the aides and all the hard work that you are, and to provide all the guidance and everything you do for them. So thank you. So I do support number 6. Any other questions or comments?
Well said, Frank. Well said.
Yep. I'll just add that FAQ was so helpful. I read every single line, and I was reading it over the weekend, and I saw Troy on there over the weekend responding, and it was just really helpful, I think, to get everybody's answers and everybody's questions out on the table. And so just thank you for that.
Thanks, Troy. Good job.
Yep. And I think it was also important too to note that, as board members, we are concerned about all of the taxpayers, not just the aides and the drivers that this is affecting, but there have been taxpayers who have reached out to me and said, why are we paying people? But when I told them and talked to them about what they're doing and what people are doing, then it made sense to them. So I think everybody understands that in this crisis and of what this whole country and this whole world is going through right now. So you just have to do what's right for the better of everybody.
Cheryl, you made a good point there. So the other thing I was just thinking is, and thank you for bringing that up, but these aides want to work. I mean, a lot of them reached out to me and had the conversations through via email and phone calls. But, Dan, to the executive team, we can utilize them, and I'm just going off what it's an assumption, and I get it, nothing 100%. Let's just say school's done for the year, right? we have to clean lockers. We have to get all these. I know my kids have their stuff in their lockers. Are they going to be able to come in? So these aides would help out and clean lockers. There's jobs and duties that these aides would help out. And then with the virtual kickoff that's happening all this week that the teachers are going through to get ready for our big kickoff on April 6th, they're going to need help and support, and these aides will be there for them. So that's something that we should look at. And I know that if you asked for help, these aides would be there right behind them to help them as much as possible. So that's something we should look at. I know you will, and I know, and so thank you for that. But getting back to the taxpayers, I guarantee a lot of things are going to change. Like Andy said, with the stimulus, it's changing every 3 to 5 minutes. Trust me, I'm in the middle of all that. But I guarantee with our school district, it's the same thing, that a lot of these aides will be employed and deployed into different situations that maybe it's a little different than the responsibilities they do every day in the school year. But I know these aides would never say no. So
I'll just say that what Frank says, we've been contacted by many people who are willing to do all sorts of different things. And the point I made earlier about folks being available to be recalled, I truly believe that this group of people would mobilize very quickly if things changed, or we needed volunteers, or we had additional duties and responsibilities that could be fulfilled. And this option that we're exploring would allow us to, reach out to the group, to populate new work hours and times and duties and bring people in. And I think that the group would meet that challenge quickly. So.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Well, I just want
I don't
to
hear
make
them.
it clear. Can you hear me?
No.
I just want to make it clear that what I suggested before wasn't on our list. Because on number 1, it says 0 paid by the district. And I suggested if anyone had to go on unemployment, that the district would make up the difference at the end of the school year by way of a stipend to all the people, just so you guys understand where I was coming from.
Yep.
And he then mentioned that they're going to change the law today. When I talked to Andy and I talked to Dan at great length about how I was in favor of, paying the aides and stuff, and making sure, in fact, when I first met Andy, I reiterated to him that I want to make sure that they got paid. That was my first statement. I talked to Dan again today about my fear of losing employees. So I was on board the whole time with making people whole on this thing. And I only suggested the idea I put forth because I thought that if they could collect unemployment, we could make them whole at the end of the year by supplementing them with a stipend, and thereby you save, because we have to pay them around $500,000 to continue with paying them to the end of the year.
Correct.
If you let it collect unemployment and say it would be $150,000 left, we could give those people a stipend to make up that $150,000. We'd still have $350,000 left, which would carry over to the next year. That's what I was wanting to do.
All right.
But unemployed.
You probably won't be able to do that because the law is going to change.
Correct.
As we speak.
Correct.
So
But unemployed.
that being said, I'm on board with number 6.
I'll just
Okay,
say-
I want your comment because I know unemployment, they don't take taxes out. And then when you do take unemployment, you have to pay tax at the end of the year on unemployment.
You're responsible for it.
I'll just say that, what Mark's sharing, he's been very collaborative and creative through this whole process. He came in right off the bat and talked to me and Andy about a variety of different scenarios that could help make the staff whole. So I haven't thought that his opinion has been dramatically contrary from anything else that's been stated. He's just been very creative in his approach throughout. So.
No, we appreciate it. We appreciate what everyone does, administrators. I know you guys are working hard. The teachers aren't at school and the aides aren't at school, but I know you guys are behind the scenes doing the right thing and getting the agendas put up for us and getting us options. But we're a family here. We're always going to be a family. So that's why I'm ready to go number 6 if everyone's ready.
All right, so then we can call for a
Okay.
vote.
So thank you, Mark. Thank you, Darren.
You going to do a roll call vote, Frank? It's probably easier.
Yeah, I can. Thank you. Mark,
Yes.
Darren,
Yes.
Jane,
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
Leah,
Yes.
Cheryl,
Yes.
Frank is a yes. The motion is so approved. Option 6.
All right, that's option 6, 7-0 for Jill taking notes back in the office. Thank you, everyone. Next item.
Information items, transportation payment for 2019 and 20 for the calendar year.
So as I mentioned before, at about 3:40, 3:50 this afternoon, we had another wrench thrown into the whole mix here. So originally, Dan and I were approached on March 13th prior to school being closed down for any period of time from Right Way about if school gets closed down, working with them to provide them payment to cover days that we're going to be off. Dan and I, again, at that point, school hadn't been called off, so we really didn't even talk about it, set off to the side, because about 20 minutes after we addressed our administrative council, school was canceled for at least 2 weeks by the governor's order. So changing very rapidly. I've had a whole bunch of communications with area districts about where they are and what they're doing, and those range anywhere from paying 0% to paying 100% for a period of time. Most of the districts are evaluating after April 3rd. The wrench that got thrown in this afternoon from our legal counsel, I've had them looking at a couple of things. One was based on the federal reimbursement that could possibly be coming for them. But the wrench that was thrown in the stimulus package is there's a provision in there potentially requiring school districts to pay bus companies, pay transportation companies through the shutdown. And so I'm going to ask us to table this until we get a little further details on that from our legal counsel. And at this point, I kind of left it with our legal counsel as fill me in when you have some more details after you've had someone really dig into the law and determine what does that mean for us. The one thing I will say is if it's federally mandated, some of that it'll be easier to recoup funds if stimulus is provided to the transportation company versus if we try to incorporate it into some sort of contract or agreement. So that would be a plus if we end up in the long run doing anything or being required to do anything. Federal stimulus would be easier to be recouped on our behalf. But I'm just going to ask us to table it till we have further guidance. Ideally, I'll have it for the 6th, depending on how long it's going to take them to dig into it and really give us a solid answer, solid direction of where to go.
Do we need to have a motion to table something or no?
This is just a discussion point, and we were looking for some guidance.
Yep.
So at this point, there was no vote being addressed tonight.
Okay. Number 7, middle school science adoption.
John, at this point, I'm going to get out of presenting and put it towards you.
Okay, I'll pull it up. So before you, there's items 7, 8, 9, and 10. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, but we can't see anything.
Yep, it's coming through right
Okay.
now.
Okay.
Just a little bit slow. Can you see?
It's getting there. Now it is.
Okay. So the first curriculum situation report is for middle school science 6 through 8. It's Amplify Science. It's a science program that is rated highly by Ed Reports. Ed Reports is an independent company that looks at educational resources and rates them based on rigor, alignment to standards, and so forth. And as you can see in the situation report on page 2, you can see that it's rated in green, which is rated very highly. And there were 8 teachers that have been piloting Amplify Science throughout this school year. And we had a meeting about a month ago with them to see and get feedback from them. And they felt that it was rigorous for certain, and that it's a science program of high quality that meets learners' needs. Any questions on the middle school science?
Is this web-based, or can you give me a little more explanation of it?
Sure, it is web-based. It's through different the Wisconsin academic standards for thinking like a scientist. So it's investigative, it's research, it's thinking like a scientist, writing like a scientist. There are labs that go along with the program as well, and it is also web-based as well.
Will this meet the needs of all of our different learning students?
Yeah, one of the great question. One of the great components of it is there's a lot of differentiation that can be provided through the program. And when we started looking at all resources, one of the things that we're looking at is how does the resource address EL students, students with special education, socioeconomically disadvantaged, and how does that support? And this program can be differentiated to support all learners' needs.
Were there any, what was some of the negatives about it at all, if there were any?
One of the ones that, because it is a web-based program, is like screen time that we've discussed. We've heard this before, but it's getting into it and teaching and instructing a little bit differently. We don't just put learners on computers. We have to explain, we have to look at what can we do, not traditionally, but in a more traditional format versus just being online and looking at videos and 3D models and so forth.
So is it going to be different than, let's say, of a online, like Alex is very much web-based. So is it going to be something similar to that, or will there, because we heard a lot of concerns, and especially in the beginning about Alex, because it was so much focused on computers and not everybody learns as well on a computer.
Yeah, it's a mixture of both live, face-to-face. There are some online components that will be implemented and used throughout the learning process, but it is a mixture and a blend of online and direct instruction.
And then I guess my last question before I turn it over to others is what kind of, is this something we're looking to adopt for the fall season? And if it is, what kind of time are we looking for as far as for teacher preparation?
Excellent question. So teachers, there have been 8 teachers now that have piloted. And yes, it will be for the fall of, or for the school year of 2021. And we'll continue to provide professional development to those educators ongoing. So the professional development doesn't start or end with the adoption, it's continuous throughout. So even through next school year, we will be providing professional development around the resource to best support educators and then to impact learning at the highest level.
Because of what's going on right now, and we don't know if or when we're going to be able to come back this year, how will that impact starting a program like this in the fall?
Right now, our entire district, 4K through 12, are going through the virtual learning model and really learning through Google Meet and modules that we've been putting together for them. It will look different if we were not obviously to have that face-to-face interaction through professional development, but we will be putting together continuous professional development virtually and through what we call learning modules, videos, questions, examples, and so forth.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I had both a question and I guess a few comments. One is, I know this as well as a couple of the other recommendations for different thank you, have a cost component with them. Is that something that is currently built into a budget somewhere?
Yes, when we started the pilot this year, that was built in with this current this current school year's budget. So the cost, because we had 8 teachers piloting, some of that cost has already been absorbed because we had to pay for the pilots. But the $142,555 is budgeted, and that will come out of this current year's budget because we provided the professional development this year and we started pilot implementation with many of the classrooms.
Okay.
So the budget will come out of the current school year's budget.
Okay. From a comment perspective, I have had a handful of middle school science teachers reach out to me who are not supportive of this. Their thought was that it was too web-based, that there are some hands-on, but very limited And I talked with my own 7th grader, who is not a fan of it. She's one student, I get that. But I guess that concerns me a little bit, especially with block scheduling and having these longer class periods, that if more of it is online based and less of it hands-on. Sounds like there's a little bit of a blended this year, but a lot of the hands-on is the teachers preparing those pieces as opposed to part of the Amplify curriculum. And I have no clue whether or not we ever survey some of our students. My guess would be 8th graders probably have done Amplify and did things prior to Amplify. I'd love some input there. I guess I saw a little bit of the plus Delta that was done for Amplify, and the list for the Delta was pages compared to the pluses, which was a page. So I guess I have some concerns.
So it is a blended investigative resource. It's aligned to the Wisconsin science standards. So it is different than how we taught science in the years past, where it was more lab type scientific discovery, whereas this is research, critical thinking, analyzing. It's aligned to the 21st century skills. As far as the online component to it, yeah, there is a portion of it that is online, but we also had a science. We met with some of the science teachers that had questions. Because they had questions, we walked them through with this Amplify Science consultant, and we were able to clear up a lot of those questions. I think some of the concern is it is changed from what we've currently, or how we've currently taught science. And with change comes, the unknown, some fear, well, this is the way we always used to do it. That is true, but the way we used to do it is not aligned to current standards. And because of the standards changing, our educators have to learn new standards and also align. We also have to have a resource that's aligned to the new standards, that's rigorous enough to meet the 21st century learning skills.
I just want to make sure we have students that are engaged as well. And I understand if it may be the way things are done, but I still think there's, and I'm dating myself, some of what I loved in science was the hands-on and the actual experiments, and not reading about it or seeing it in a PowerPoint, but actually doing it. And if we want students to be engaged as well, I think that's,
and that, Jane, and that still happens. Teachers can still do experiments that are aligned with the different units and lessons within Amplify. As I said before, it's a blend. It's blended learning. It's not all online. It's not all traditional. It's not all experiments. It's investigative. It's research. It's experiments.
They felt like if they had to add their own, they would not get through the amount of coursework that was recommended. Again, just feedback I'm hearing from.
John, this is Frank. I also had some teachers.
You're not on, Frank.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No. Well, while you're finding that, Frank, are there any other districts or anybody else that's using this program currently?
There are some districts that are using it. One of the attractions to it was the high rating that it received through Ed Reports. And DPI, one of the pieces that DPI recommends, or what they suggest, is that any resource adoption that's being thought to adopt, you look at Ed Reports and see how is it rated. There's a lot of different science programs out there, but the rating is very, very low. And it was the opinion of Anna Lee, myself, when Amplify was brought in, that it was aligned to the state standards. It was rated very highly by Ed Reports, and we want to have the best resources in the hands of educators, followed by high quality professional development to best prepare our educators so that they can instruct at the highest level with our learners.
Can you guys hear me now? Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. I also concur with you, Jan. I had a couple teachers reach out to me. I also have a daughter and a son, and the comments I got were also they're worried about the curriculum going too fast, that there's no time for reflection, and that not every kid thinks on the same time. And then also they're also concerned about the control of the audience, where the web-based kicks in, and then you have obviously the in-person, I guess what you call tutoring conversation in class. So I'm a little concerned on that also, because the feedback I did get back is that it's kind of like being pushed, but there's no time for reflection from the teacher side of it. So just something to think about.
Sure, and that will come with professional development. Again, it's not all the teachers have piloted, and the teachers that have piloted, it's their first time into it. Anytime you have a new program, there's things that you're going to add to, there's things that you may cut back on, and that's where our professional development plan will help support educators through not only the first year, but the second year, the third year, the fourth year, and so forth.
I had a question about how this would sort of like merge into the high school curriculum. Because I know for Alex, a lot of us, we thought it was fine in middle school, but then when we came to high school and started taking classes that didn't use Alex at all, it was a big switch. So do you think this would translate well into the high school level?
I do. I think it will provide the foundational skills, like I said before, to think like a scientist, write like a scientist, explore like a scientist, investigate like a scientist. It has engineering components. It has analytical components to it. It has a lot of different higher level thinking skills that are required in today's society for not only careers, but also medical field, engineering, and so forth. And that's one of the other pieces that it gets highly rated on, is the level of rigor that is required for students using the Amplify program.
Have we had anybody are there any teachers from the high school who have been involved in this pilot at all?
No, it's new to the middle school level. As it branches out, we will be looking at what vertical alignment from 6-12, and then we have Pearson Science in the elementary, which is built through the same standards that the middle school standards are aligned to. So it will scaffold up through vertical alignment. We started in the middle school because it was, I think, 2000 was the last science adoption. So the current resources we have do not address or align to today's Wisconsin academic science standards. So to answer your question, yes, we will be looking at how does this align to coursework at the high school.
Is there any way to, I mean, it sounds like some of us have some concerns. So is there any way to bring some more information from some of these other districts that have used it, other than a pie chart showing that it's got such a great rating? Because we don't know if that's something, if that's a pie chart from all over the country, if that's around our local area. I mean, it would be just, and maybe that might help staff members feel better if they could talk or have some input from people who've actually used it.
Sure. The Ed Reports is national. It's a national organization that reviews all curriculums from the East Coast to the West Coast, from north to south, all over the country. They review resources and provide a rating based on different areas. But yes, I can provide more information on the April 6th meeting.
Just
Thank
on a
you.
go forward basis, this is definitely the kind of thing for me that when it gets down to, we are at the end of a pilot, teachers are meeting with administration to share the things they like, the things that could be different. I'm happy to be included or invited into some of those meetings. And again, it may just be as a fly on the wall to sit and listen, because I'm not a science teacher or, a math teacher or whatever it might be looking at. I haven't piloted it. But for me, hearing firsthand the questions or concerns and the answers to those is helpful, because I have to admit, in reading something like this, if I hadn't gotten calls from a few teachers, I probably would have said, Sounds good, rated well, in the budget. But it's the kind of thing where I feel like maybe I don't always have all the information to make that decision. And I get that I couldn't be in all of those meetings, but you know.
John, can I add something?
Yes, please.
So I know that last year I came to you all, or about a year ago, 2 years ago, with the Pearson adoption for elementary school for science. And it was a major adjustment in elementary because we weren't teaching science every day and we were using Einstein kits, which weren't aligned. And so John's talked a lot about what's aligned with the standards that are out there. And I think it is an adjustment, right? When we haven't had a new resource in 20 years, that's going to make a major impact on what's going on in classrooms, but it doesn't mean it's not the right shift. And when John talked about 8 teachers piloting this, they have had a lot of voice in what was going on, and they've shared, like any pilot, even when we were piloting Pearson, you know, there's always concerns because you're working out and ironing out the differences between what was going on and what the new resource looks like. So having 8 doing it, we only have literally a couple teachers to bring on board with Amplify and looking at what we're going to do moving forward if we go with this adoption. If we don't, then we'll look at piloting something different next year. There aren't other resources that highly ranked. And the other thing to keep in mind, while it is blended, it engages. It's not just on a computer. The teachers do have the ability to teach with it. But the other thing too is that the testing and things like that, not that we pick a resource to align to it, but the rigor of science has increased and changed dramatically because our jobs are changing dramatically. And I know you've all heard me talk about that multiple times. And the STEM related piece is going to align with what the students are coming from elementary to middle school looking for. And it's also going to align to the adjustments at the high school that a lot of the teachers that are on the design team can tell you about because they've dug through the standards. So I think it is an adjustment and we recognize that. We also know that it's an advantage to have over 3/4 of our teachers piloting and using it this year. So we just have a few to train. And that if we switch directions right now, there's not another resource out there that's as well aligned. And I know it's tough when you're looking at a national ranking piece and we have educators saying like, we're struggling with this part. I think some of it's the trust that we're going to work with the educators on the part they're struggling with or maybe not feeling out very well and then work through that together. Like I'd rather see us talk about and look at how we do that than like trying to shift when there might not be another or there's not another resource out there as well aligned right now. It is going to feed well off our elementary program. It is going to feed well into what's going on at the high school.
Thank you, Annalee. Any other questions? Okay. Elementary K2 adoption core knowledge language arts.
Let me pull that up. So can everybody see my screen still? Yes? No?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I couldn't hear. This adoption, we had 14 teachers involved in the pilot. It's based on foundational skills for literacy. DPI has come out with a stance on really getting at the primary levels foundational skills explicit to phonics. Again, with high levels of professional development for educators and cracking the code for learners, explicit instruction is needed at the primary levels with a foundational phonics component. And again, in the situation report, we have kindergarten, first and second grade, the ratings from Ed Reports, and you can see that it's rated very highly and is a resource that we want to bring forward. We had literacy task force meeting, brought in educators from all 7 elementary buildings, learning coaches, administrators, building administrators, district level administrators, looking at what would be a really solid K2 program that will meet the needs of all learners with phonics. Now, this is just one half of learning how to read. The other piece is obviously comprehension and vocabulary, and we'll look at that down the road. We did not want to overwhelm teachers with trying to bring in two components or two big pieces for reading. So that the CKLA was the curricular resource that has been recommended for K through 2.
John, can you pull up table 1 so that people can see it at home?
Table 1.
There you go.
Sorry about that. Yep. So you can see how the alignment, there's 58 points. It scores anywhere from 55 to 56 out of 58 for alignment in first, second, third grade, and then usability, 33 out of 34. So it's a very highly rated resource to be implemented for phonics.
I'm just glad to see us going finally back to phonics. I've been here long enough. I've seen the circle. It's something we drifted away from years ago, I think, and or touched on it briefly. And so I'm glad to see us coming back to that.
And literacy is a blend. It can't be all phonics. It cannot be all, comprehension, vocabulary. What's nice about the CKLA program, just real quick, is it also has a grammar component to it. It incorporates spelling. There's a lot of natural pieces that tie into the phonics development for literacy for the primary grade levels.
Any questions?
Nope.
Okay, let me pull up the next one. Close this out. World cultures. World cultures. Can you see the situation report?
Yep.
Okay. World cultures is going to be a new 9th grade course. So we had to find a resource that was going to provide high levels of engagement, research-based, aligned with the college, career, and civic life standards. It was designed through the inquiry model, where it's investigative to research and analyze and think critically on what geography means, using different geography resources and tools for the world cultures course. It also ties in cultures that the educators would be teaching about. And this is part of the social studies pathway. So social studies at 9th grade will be world cultures, 10th grade U.S. history, which I'll get to the next situation report, and then government at the 11th grade level. Any questions on?
Yeah, I just had a question. On this one, I noticed that you mentioned that it's a 6-year contract, but the other two you didn't.
Yes.
Are the other two just a one-time purchase, or this?
So good. Yes. The CKLA, it's a one and done. So you purchase it, you have all the resource. We're purchasing the 2nd edition, which is the newest edition. And then for Amplify, it is an 8-year contract.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions for world cultures?
I don't have it.
We're good.
Okay, and then I'll go to the U.S. history situation report. Everybody can see it?
Yep.
Okay, so with U.S. history, we have U.S. history 1 and 2 currently. That'll be condensed starting next year to one course. And the resource that we looked at multiple resources. And this resource is a resource that is also built through the inquiry model, which is part of the state standards, the C3 model, which is part of the Wisconsin state standards, college and career civic life. It's similar to the world cultures. It's thinking like a historian, researching like a historian, analyzing, investigating, and some of it is web-based. There will be, what I should have said for world cultures too, there will be classroom sets of textbooks, but also online licenses. So in the classroom, they'll have access to textbooks, and then it'll also be online. Cheryl, you asked about that. And one of the other adoptions, when are we going to shift more towards the online approach? Well, this too is a blended approach as well.
Any questions?
Any questions?
John, this is a general question.
Sure.
I know that moving to things online as a whole saves cost in textbooks and they get ratty after a couple of years and things like that. Just knowing that there also are different types of learners in anything that we have that is primarily web-based. Do we have some type of text that for me personally, I absorb things much better reading it from a book than I do off of a screen. Do we have those things available for students?
Yes, we will have textbooks as well. Not every learner will have a textbook, but there'll be enough for class sets. So if let's say my internet broke at home or my computer's not working, I can take a text and take that home and bring it back the next day or the next, 2 days, whatever that might be. So yes, there will be access to a textbook. Just to be clear though, there's 30 copies per teacher.
Sure.
If we have 8 teachers teaching or 6 teachers teaching U.S. history, there would be 180 textbooks.
So they'll be able to go home and do homework online with those.
Yes.
Okay.
And anything in print, text quote unquote, is online as well. So the same passages in a textbook are also online that can be printed off as well.
All right, any questions? All right, next one. Thank you, John.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Next
John,
one is school youth program fees.
I'm going to stop sharing.
Thank you so much. So one moment while I get up here. Can everybody see the situation report?
Yep.
Okay, so a couple of items. One, typically we bring back school fees, food service fees, and or youth program fees on a yearly basis, although the board, I can't even think of what they're called. I'm losing my mind for a moment. The board policies do not require to bring it back from time to time. So thank you. School fees. So one of the things that we were going to bring forth, which I think is even more prudent given our current situation, but for the last couple of years, we've added $1 or $2, and we've kind of moved them along with CPI. What we've done, though, is historically used the current change. So if we take a look at our situation report in 2017, 18, we had $60 as our school fee here. We used CPI to change it to 62. We use that $62 number with the new CPI of 2.44% to give us 64. What I did was go back to when we first instituted that, and I ran it by true CPI, and you can see it across as you just follow my cursor here. And we'd end up at about $63.91 if we followed true CPI. And right now in that particular group, we're at about $64. I have another example below. In any case, if we track true CPI and attach it to true CPI, we are not requesting a school fee adjustment for this particular year because we've made it over the course of 3 years. I think even more prudent in our given time, we're having a whole bunch of our community members are going to be laid off in this particular time, so raising school fees is really not in our best interest at this particular time. The second one, food service fees operate a little bit differently. We are required to use what's called a food service calculator or food service estimator by the federal government because we're part of the federal school lunch program. We receive federal funds. So we take October claims for every meal sold, not a free and reduced meal, but a meal sold in all of the different categories. So we have a K-5 meal, we have a 612 regular, and then we have a couple of premium and chef meals at the 612 level. So we punch all that into a big calculator, and it gives us an average rate. One of the things before we even adjust that average rate is we have to run our December 31st fund balance for Fund 50. If it's negative, we automatically have to increase if the food service calculator says we have to increase. This year, our food service balance is $22,105.96. Like we're bordering right on that zero mark. Now we don't have to increase because we're above zero, but we're really close. So I'm recommending an increase. So I punched into the food service calculator and we have to increase by an average of about a nickel per meal. So in the chart below, what I've recommended is we keep our K-5 price the same. We keep our 612, our regular meal that meets the FSL rules, our food service lunch program Minimum requirements, we keep that meal the same. And our two top meals, our premium and our chef meal, which are a little bit higher quality, we're buying up. So think of like the super value meal versus just the value meal at McDonald's. You're buying up to get something a little bit different. Raising that premium meal by a nickel and that chef meal by 10 cents. Plugging all those in, again, keeping our cheapest cost, which is elementary, and our standard meal the same. Raising those premium meals by a nickel and a dime meets that 5-cent requirement. So this one will need board approval if we're to move forward with that particular piece. So we'll break that down below. So I'm going to stop there before we get to youth program fees because we'll have to talk about the middle school change as well. Any questions about the food service lunch program?
The chef, the chef, can you hear me? The chef fee goes up 10 cents.
The chef one would go up 10 cents and the premium up a nickel.
Those increases seem to make sense.
Mm-hmm.
My question is actually about the 22,000.
Mm-hmm.
So is that number the okay, I'm trying to figure out if this number is tied to the number that hit the newspapers a few months ago where we were we had not collected the right amount of money for lunch, correct?
Yep, correct.
So is this number tied to that number?
There's not a direct correlation, but it's included in that calculation. So this
Could you explain to me what this number actually is?
Yep. So fund balance is, like, by auditor standards, is calculated on June 30th of any particular given year. But truth be told, it's more of a checking account. So it ebbs and flows as revenues come in. So in food service, it starts out really heavy in expenses. We're paying employees, we're paying food, we're paying all this up front before we've even made a meal. Then come first day of school, so we'll just use September 1st, we start selling meals. So we get some revenue in from people who are paying. But our major source of revenue in food service is actually our free and reduced lunches that we provide. So we can provide those at the end of the month. So our biggest source of revenue doesn't even come in until the middle to end of October by the time we've made that first claim. So again, expenses heavy, hard to see on my computer here, but expenses heavy, revenue is light. And then those start pairing out. By the time we get to the end of the year, hopefully our revenues just exceed our expenses slightly. Like, we're not looking to make money, we just don't want to lose money. So we were at about $170,000 at the beginning of the year, so July 1st. So we were short about $150,000 between July 1st and December 31st to get down to 22. Now, some of that again is the whole the negative balances that people have garnered from their meals. So we've been attacking that pretty heavily, but all of that started post December 31st. So that started middle to end of January on a first round, middle to end of February on a second round. And at this point, other than the people we're already working with, we've kind of put a hiatus on it. But that number would have only been affected by the negative balances, not anything we've tried to recoup.
Andy, I got a question about the school fees. That CPI of 1.8161. Where did you come up with that?
So the CPI of 2.13, 2.44, 1.81, that's the number we use for negotiating with teachers. So that's the CPI number provided to us from the state. I calculate that on a monthly basis, so I kind of track it as it's going along, but those are the numbers provided for that. So we're carrying that same rationale of how we apply CPI to the fees as well.
Because you know as well as I knew that number next year won't even come close.
Well, right now it's tracking at about 2.45, but it's going to crash following March.
Yeah,
we'll see how it goes. This 1.81 is set in stone because that's 2019.
Yeah, I can tell you preliminaries, you're looking at minus 20, 30%.
2020 is going to look totally different. But this is set in stone for the upcoming year.
That's what I'm only saying is I'm glad you're not raising prices because it's some, like you said, layoffs and the world that we're living in right now is a whole different egg right now. So thank you.
I got a question. So at the beginning of the year, they put money into their lunch account. Is that correct? The parents?
Ideally, yes.
Okay. So at the end of the year, say they're negative. The next year they come back, say in 10th grade, do the parents clear that negative up, or they just put money into a new account and start fresh because
that account starts with them the moment they start in the district. So if they started as a kindergartner, that carries through graduation. Same account.
Okay.
Any other questions on the food service? People will vote at this all at the end, although they'll be broken out. So youth program fees, this is in relation to running an Aspire-like program, but at the middle school level for PM only. We have Heather on the line if you have specific questions about it. But essentially it's broken out into a monthly fee, and you can see those. And then emergency day is a little bit different. So Heather has to have a certain number of students like any business would have to operate. A gym membership would be a great example. You have to have an X number of bodies in there in order to just break even. So she's kind of laid that out. But we do offer an emergency fee, as there might be a time a month that you have to drop your child off. It's going to be more advantageous to just pay for that one day than it would the month. So we have that in as well. And Heather, do you want to address a little bit of the before and after, how it necessarily works?
So we would be offering before and after care at the middle school level as well. And we're looking at staffing over at East Middle School in the morning for one person, one staff member. Over at West would be 2 staff members, both morning and afternoon. So those prices, those fees would pay for our staff that are there. And then we would be using some of the tax levy funds that we had to provide for some furnishings to update some of the spaces over at East Middle School that we would be using, and bringing in some supplies and things as well over at West.
Has this been a request from parents to have a middle school option?
It has been, especially for those families that are incoming 6th graders. Some of those 6th grade students don't have access to a lot of after school activities. Parents in the morning want to drop off before the 8 o'clock start because they're either open enrollment families or they have to get to work early and they don't want their middle schoolers staying at home. So this would provide them a safe place to be in the morning and afternoon.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? So do you want us to vote on this?
Yeah, we have a recommendation below for the food service fees and youth program fees as presented in this particular document.
Do you have a motion?
Mr. Niglia moves. Are we doing this today or April 6th?
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Today is information only. Yes, we'll bring.
That's what I thought.
Thank you, Frank. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
We're jumping the gun.
All right, thank you, Andy. Now we want to go to the budget.
Yep. So I have a budget presented for us here. If I can figure out how to increase the size. I don't know if I'm going to be able to. So, well, I am not going to be able to. I apologize. I'll try to make it bigger for next time we do this on our first go round.
Andy, we can make it bigger on our end. You can. It's a PDF, so we can hit the plus.
Okay, perfect. So I want to focus on, if you can follow my cursor down here, so our miscellaneous fees right here. You can see that we budgeted 603,000. We have 691,000 to date. Those come from 2 things, or an increase really over budgeted. E-rate funds, which are federal reimbursement for technology purposes. So all that's done by Chris Bennett. So Chris has communicated quite a bit with us about his plans and how that affects E-rate reimbursement. So he goes through that entire process to try to generate funds. The second piece is called Focus on Energy. So all the LED lighting projects that we've done, and we're starting to try to do some in-house things as well. We're running those by Focus on Energy as well and getting reimbursements for those. So if we pay for things out of Fund 49, those dollars have to go to Fund 49. But we've done a lot of the LED projects out of our own budget, or we've used fund balance and restoring that yearly, but we're able to recoup those into Fund 10. So we've done a pretty good job, much higher than anticipated in that particular area. Everything else seems pretty status quo. The one area I'll tell you that will take a hit is going to be interest. So interest rates have dipped significantly. And so we're looking at different ways to step our current cash on hand into CDs and do it by months, that we can try to recoup a little bit more than what's being offered right now, but it's gone down dramatically. And so that's already a point we're taking a look at for next year's budget and we'll address. When we go to expenses, I just want to remind us that under salaries, our third month check was in January, where in the last 2 years it's been in March. So by the time we take a look at March, we'll be back to even par. So right now our percentage is a little bit higher, given those particular pieces. And then the last thing I wanted to address just in the expenses is under miscellaneous again. So under Fund 10, you can see we budgeted $219,000. We've expensed $259,000. We received an unpaid property tax bill from the city of Oak Creek for about $133,000 last month. So we're required to pay that. We'll be able to recoup those funds next year as part of our tax levy, but that's an unknown number that we budget. We make a forecast for every year, but it's truly unknown. Next year, I don't have any idea what it's going to look like. As we all know, the final property tax payments are due coming up. They've extended the date, but who knows what that's going to look like. So we could be on the hook for another large dollar amount, but essentially it's prepaying it. So we pay it now, we recoup it back when we do our tax levy in the following year. But it does count against our current year expenses in its current format. So that really pushes way past that particular piece. And then if we take a look at our fund balance, again, our fund balance is remaining pretty steady when we take a look at our 12-month outlook. So from February of last year to February this year, really the major changes, we're just breaking out the health insurance piece, but our true fund balance is really pretty steady from year to year. And historically, over the last couple of years, we've tried to hold it flat. And at some point, we're going to have to take a little bit look to that, because $24 million, while it sounds a lot, of 72 million, it's 33%, but at 96 million, it's only 25%. So it starts to chew away into what it really is against our overall expenses. So as our expenses go up, at some point, our fund balance is going to have some adjustments to go up to keep our percentage. Think about it in terms of your home or car payment like that. At some point, you want enough liquidity to last a few months in your home. So the more money you make, the higher that amount of liquidity you want on hand goes up. So it's a very similar philosophy with our fund balance. But we are very strong. So there's no particular issues at this time. We'll want to address long term and what the strategy is. Not for today, not even in today's time and all the things we're going through, but long-term strategy at some point.
Should we be able to save some money on supplies this year since we're not in school?
Well, in theory, yes, but we purchased like 100 extra iPads and 200 Wi-Fi, whatever hotspots, and we bought a new curriculum, or not a new curriculum, but a new platform for elementary to roll out virtual learning. So I would say in theory, yes, but we start to pile it out with new expenses.
I just seen that big number. So
yeah, truthfully, I'm hoping that we're able to stay on budget this year with trading off some of those things that we would buy at the year end for things we brought on to be virtual.
Is there anything that we can do now as far as CIP things that can be done because there aren't people in the buildings, or?
So yes and no. We're working on some of our projects with Nexus, but we're trying to do things that only take the building down for 3 days at a time. So I'll give you a great example. We're going to do LED lights in the buildings that are being torn apart, but if at any particular time we go in and take the entire ceiling grid down, do some work above, Dan could say we're having school in 3 days and we have to figure out how to get that room and everything else back together. And so we're trying to get as much done as we can and be cautious. As Frank mentioned earlier, if all of a sudden the governor comes out tomorrow and says school's canceled for the year, we're going to tear apart the buildings as soon as we can and get Shepherd done and Carrollton, those buildings that are having lots of work done this summer. But until we know that, we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves and put ourselves in a position that we just can't recover from.
So what we need from the state or federal government is definitive guidance before we would start pulling things out, right? Just our luck, we'd decide to get way ahead on our construction timetable, and then there'd be like a federal, zones of exposure reopening or something like that. So we're trying to be very cautious, but we're trying to make hay while the sun shines at the same time. So that 3-day rule or the ability to do things that we could run simultaneously if we were under a return. That's the most cautious, conservative, thoughtful methodology we've been able to come up with, like as we kind of walk through this crisis, without putting ourselves in a bind if something changes. Because as everybody in this room knows, they've changed everything on us right after we've made a decision. So we're trying to be thoughtful here.
With that stated, though, you will notice that fencing will go up at Carrollton in the very near future, and they'll start doing some digging because we're working on the addition of the gym and the offices, not the building inside getting done yet, but we worked it out with Paul actually prior to all of this to get that construction, exterior construction started. So we'll see that. That has no bearing on anything that's happening that was already a long time in the works.
Are we going to be having Nexus come in at all for any of our meetings to give us updates?
So Nexus was originally scheduled, but one thing we've done is we've stripped a lot of our like non-essential policy updates from these meetings. I mean, we're already 7:15 plus a series of other things, right? And we had no idea how this format would function, right? It seems pretty smooth. If we end up updating policy 171 in the near term to change how we meet, maybe we work something out, but we've had to trim a couple things. Like in a minute, when Frank cues me on this, I'll talk about that more at length, what we've kind of done with our board agenda. Go ahead, Andy, sorry.
I was just going to add, I've asked for their PowerPoint, and so we'll be able to review that and share that particular piece, but we probably won't have them come in and talk to them, but we'd be more than happy to take any questions to them in the short term. One of our goals this summer is to get you out to see some of the work that's been done in sites. I don't know how many of you have had a chance, but to get a little inner walking and seeing some of the inner works of it with some members of Nexus that can address questions directly and with their construction knowledge.
We're getting a little far afield now, but I'll just say that like it was an intention and they were prepared, but circumstances. So, but you'll hear plenty more on that subject later on.
All right, thank you.
All right, review upcoming school board meeting agendas.
So the document that you have here that accompanies your packet, so part of the reason why we're here right now is because the city of Oak Creek, who normally very graciously hosts us, has something else going on at their site, and they're coming to grips with all their different, like how many people in a room, even though they're also an exempted entity as someone that provides essential government functions, we're all trying to follow the CDC guidelines as closely as we can. So until further notice, we'll likely be at this site or in some other site that our policy stipulates going forward, right? So no more City Hall for the time being, but we still very much want to continue to broadcast these meetings in the interest of transparency, right? So this format allows us to record them and post them later on. So we're going to continue to do that, but you'll notice the locations are district office and likely going forward, even though the April 27th still says City of Oak Creek Council Chamber. Like I don't imagine we'll be back there anytime soon. So
just so we're clear though, right now we're not going live out on the web right now, right? For everybody?
Are you nervous about your comments?
No, I'm just saying
here, let me clarify.
Recorded, but it's going to be posted on the website later.
Yes. So this meeting right now is being recorded. It's not being live streamed, but it's going to be presented in its totality when it's finished. So, and that's what we'll continue to do. So we still have all the different interactive features, and we also have to have a feature that allows public comment. Like that's why we have the other room set up with guests who can come, and there's a 10-person limit in the other half of that room. We'll get to that in a minute. But we're trying very hard to balance CDC, state, federal guidelines, our own policy edicts, and the statutes we exist under that require us to meet and require transparency. So it's a balancing act that the city of Oak Creek is going through right now too. So that's why we're here. That's why we're in this format, and adjustments will be made accordingly. So we're lined up with all those three different things going forward.
Okay.
On the April 6th agenda, you'll see the curricular items that Mr. Krennick and Mrs. Bennon brought forward, talked about. So more on the budget, and a high likelihood that Andy and I will bring something on 171. That's the policy that relates to our meetings. This format seems to have worked to a degree, but there's also improvements that could be made while we're still able to record. Perhaps there's different settings and ways and formats we could investigate that might make this a little bit easier for everyone and easier to hear, right? Because that's part of it too. When we share this broadcast, I want people to be able to hear what we're talking about. So Andy and I will get into that, and you'll probably see that soon too. There's also some election-related materials coming up on the 27th, and potentially We may still want to hear the winter athletics and activities update. We might want to still hear the special education update, though those aren't things that are necessarily like have to meet and talk about. Part of it was figuring out what our new format is. So Andy and I and Jill had to trim some like non-essential elements from this, but those are very popular features that I don't want to let go of if we don't have to, right? We just have to figure out a format to keep things streamlined. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's kind of what we have that we're looking at going forward. So that's my update, Frank. But if you flip to the next page of this, right, you will see the public comment portion. And I just want to belabor this for a second. So Mr. Bennon is our tech director, is in the other room monitoring this right now. And I didn't see if anybody had joined him in there. So Mr. Bennon, I'm asking, is there anybody in the conference room adjacent that would like to participate in the public comment portion of the meeting at this time?
There is no one here.
There is no one here. Okay. So no public comment portion tonight. And I'll kick it back to Board President Carini for item 15.
All right. Will the board consider a motion to convene to executive session per Wisconsin statute 19.851C for purpose of considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the government body has jurisdiction or exercise responsibility with respect to preliminary notice of non-renewal pursuant to Wisconsin statutes 118.22 number 3.
Sub 3. So this will be a roll call vote in a moment. How we'll do a closed session in this setting is what we'll do is we'll take the roll, right? And then we'll mute our screen. We'll have our closed session, right? We'll close the closed session. We'll return to open and then close in here too. So if that makes sense, Frank will call for the roll call.
Roll call. Mark?
Yeah.
Darren?
Was there a motion?
I don't think there's a motion. So Niglia moves to motion to go into executive session.
Millet second.
Any discussion?
Yes.
Hey, Mark?
Yeah.
Darren?
Yeah.
Jane?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Leah?
Yeah.
Cheryl?
Yes.
And I'm a yes.
Okay, so mute screens and
Yeah,